Hello, hi everybody. We'll just give everyone a minute to filter in. Welcome to the start of the evening of day 2 of our bookathon. This panel is a reading panel, Points of View I'd Follow Anywhere, featuring strong character voices. And I have a lightning round question just to start us off, and it is, what is your comfort read? We're going to start with Greg.
Oh. Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier.
Good one. JJ.
How Sweet It Is, Melissa Brayden.
Oh, lovely. Heather?
The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien.
Nice. A lot of comforting there. That one's going to take a while. Georgia?
I'm gonna say thrillers because I don't reread books.
Wow, never? Not even one? Okay.
Nope. I will rewatch movies over and over, but I've never reread a book. I have books that I love. I don't read them again. I don't know why.
I did not know that.
Uh-huh.
Joe, how about you?
Mine's kind of embarrassing. Mine's Outlander. I don't know. Like, I find something new in it every time, even though it's a hetero. I really enjoy the time travel and the medicinal, and then it's kind of like if a woman wrote Louis L'Amour. I don't know. I kind of really enjoy it.
Yeah, I think it's a great book. All right, so let's start our readings. We're going to start with Georgia Beers. Please introduce yourself and your book, and everyone else, please turn their video and audio off.
Okay, I am going to read to you. I like this topic. I'm going to read to you from my latest book, which is called The Girl Next Door. It just came out this week. All you need to know is that the main characters are Sawyer and Jenna. Sawyer is a technical writer by day and a book blogger by night. She hates the entire romance genre. She thinks it's ridiculous and unrealistic. And Jenna owns a romance-only bookshop. Sawyer has moved into the other side of the duplex where Jenna lives. So they are now very close neighbors. And Sawyer has picked up on the fact that Jenna doesn't like her, but she doesn't know why, because she doesn't know what Jenna does for a living. So she's coming home from work. Jenna is sitting on the porch, and that's where we pick up. The following Monday was like a second summer. Temps in the mid-70s, sunshine, a lovely warm breeze. Complain all you want about upstate New York winters, but the fall was simply gorgeous. Sawyer pulled into the driveway at about 5:30 after a day of meetings that were largely an unproductive waste of her time, and she was still feeling a bit frustrated about that as she approached the house and saw Jenna sitting in her love seat, a glass of what looked like iced tea on the table next to her, Arnold waiting with his tail wagging his entire body. The baby gate was across the entryway, and Jenna took her time setting her book down and releasing it so Sawyer could step onto the porch. "Hi there," she said, trying to sound somewhat cheerful. "Hey," Jenna said, refastening the gate, then returning to her seat. At least Arnold seemed happy to see her, and she squatted down and gave him some pets. When nothing more came from Jenna, she stood and slid her key into the lock, pushed her door open, and stepped inside. She set her stuff down and was about to close the door when instead she pulled it open again, pushed through the storm door back out onto the porch, because enough was enough, and she'd already had a shitty day. Why not add to it? "Have I done something to offend you?" The question spilled from her mouth before she thought about it, before she could stop and think about it. Jenna took a beat, Sawyer was sure of it, before slowly turning to meet her gaze. "I'm sorry?" "I mean, it's very clear that you don't like me, but I can't for the life of me figure out what I did to you to make you feel that way. Was it the cars on the day I moved in? Because I apologize for that. Am I too loud? I find that hard to believe because I'm pretty freaking quiet, but maybe. Is it because I'm gay? Because if that's it, then maybe you need to do some self-reflection." "You're gay?" Jenna's brow furrowed, kind of adorably, but Sawyer shook that off. "Yes, thus the rainbow sticker on my car." She pointed in that general direction. "I didn't realize." "Okay, so that's not it." Jenna blinked and stared for a moment, and Sawyer could almost see her reach deep and find her irritation again. "What do you do for a living?" Jenna asked her, somewhat carefully, and the question seemed so out of place given the conversation that Sawyer stared for a moment, needing time to pivot and readjust. I'm a technical writer for a software company. Why? Cool. Now ask me what I do for a living. Where the hell was this going? Sawyer pursed her lips for a moment and then said, Hey, Jenna, what do you do for a living? Yes, she was slightly sarcastic. It was kind of warranted, really. I own a bookshop, Jenna said, her eyes flashing. Now ask me what kind of bookshop. Uh-oh. Sawyer wet her lips. What kind of bookshop? A romance-only bookshop. Shit. Want to guess what it's called? Sawyer gazed off the porch and toward the big tree out front and took a moment. She wanted to take about 100 moments, but without looking at Jenna, she wrinkled her nose and asked, Is it called Book Love? It is! What a lucky guess! Sawyer blew out a breath and looked down at her feet. There was a scuff on her right shoe near the toe. Look, No! Jenna held up a hand. Nope. You are totally within your rights to hate the romance genre. Believe me, you're not the first person I've had a debate with about it. But you didn't just trash romance, you trashed my shop. That store is my baby, and you just mocked it. She seemed to run out of steam then and sat back in her seat. Poor Arnold sat on the floor looking from his mom to Sawyer and back like he was a spectator at Wimbledon. Sawyer sighed and tried again. Look, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have trashed your shop. You're right. That was not cool of me. But Jenna arched one eyebrow at her, waiting, almost daring, it seemed. I mean, don't you think some of what I said is right, though? Jesus, Sawyer, what the hell are you doing? Her brain shrieked at her. Shut up! Seriously? Jenna's tone wasn't one of anger or irritation. It was as if Sawyer had It was, if Sawyer had to put a word to it, almost bored. Well, yeah, I mean, romance is pretty unrealistic, don't you think? And it's so formulaic, my God, the meet cute where boy meets girl, the obstacles, overcoming the obstacles, only to have a bigger obstacle, usually a huge misunderstanding, happen, and then the makeup scene and the happily ever after. Whose life is like that? Yeah, I read your blog. You don't need to summarize it for me. Sawyer cleared her throat. Sorry. First of all, name me a genre that isn't formulaic. Formula is essentially the blueprint for almost any story of fiction. Secondly, for your information, romance is meant as an escape. Is it unrealistic? Maybe. Sometimes, sure. But readers know that. They expect it. They want it. Real life is hard enough. Have you seen the shit show of a world we live in right now? What's wrong with wanting to see two people fall in love and ride off into the sunset together? Why is that something to scoff at? Sawyer stood there, blinking at her. Most people on the other end of this debate either waved her off or ended up agreeing with her. Such a passionate defense was unexpected, interesting. And for your information, you may or may not know this, Ms. Book Blogger, but the saying in publishing is that romance keeps the lights on. Jenna made the air quotes with her fingers. It outsells all the other genres combined. If you ever decide to come down from your high horse and give romance a try, let me know. I'm kind of an expert in the field, and I would be happy to suggest a few titles. And with that, she picked her book back up, a romance, of course, judging by the two people on the cover, stretched her feet out to the railing, crossed them at the ankle, and began to read and ignore Sawyer completely. A second or two passed, and Jenna turned a page, and then Sawyer was able to make herself move. With a clearing of her throat and a slight wave of shame that washed over her, she turned and went inside, closing the door behind her and leaning back against it. Wow. Jenna Murphy had handed her her ass. That was so embarrassing. So why was she standing there with a smile on her face?
Wow, gosh, I think the timing for this topic is like so spot on. You
Yeah.
never know that when you start writing it because you wrote
Nope.
it like the year before or whatever.
Exactly.
But I was like, yes.
I actually had somebody write to me today and called out that scene in particular and said, that scene was awesome. I was like, I'm reading that tonight.
Yeah. Feeling very validated here. Thank you, Georgia. I don't remember who's next. Greg Herren. Greg is next.
Hey,
Hi,
that's me.
Greg.
Hey, Sandy.
Please go ahead and introduce yourself and your book.
Okay, my name is Greg Herren, and this is my book, my newest book, Hurricane Season Hustle. It's the 10th Scotty Bradley. adventure, as I call them, and I'm just going to read the prologue since this is about point of view, and this is always definitely from his point of view, so bear with me as I get started here. All right. American vanities come to dust in New Orleans. On the August night in 2019, when Hurricane Hester formed in the Gulf of Mexico, a mere day after the system formed off the coast of the Yucatan and started moving north slowly, forces were already in play in New Orleans, which would have made the upcoming weekend a challenge at best without the weather complication. One of the difficulties of having a mid-August birthday, besides the crippling heat and humidity, is that it's the height of hurricane season, which lasts through November. So many storms, so many memories. The history of New Orleans is littered with horrific storms. The French settlement on a high-rise along the Father of Waters was obliterated by one such occurrence within 10 years of its founding. The French just waited for the floodwater to go down, cleaned up, and started over again, which became the dominant pattern in New Orleans history, rinsed and repeated time after time for over 300 years. There have been many monster storms in the past, like the Great Hurricane of 1915, which wiped out numerous communities along the rims of the two big lakes that border on the city. And of course, everyone remembers Katrina 14 years ago. 14 years have somehow passed since that incredibly dark time for New Orleans. White hairs have started showing up in my buzzed short hair. The crow's feet around my eyes look like eagles now. Muscle and joints ache and moan and groan, and muscle fatigue from the gym doesn't dissipate quickly the way it used to. The siren song of gay bars and the dance floor isn't impossible to ignore as it once was, and besides, hangovers last longer and seem more intense than they used to when I was younger. The bars are different than they used to be, too. Now gay bars are filled with straight women. Bachelorette parties are the worst. And the gay guys are all staring at their phones when they aren't on the dance floor, and some apparently have their phones grafted to their hands on the dance floor, too. I resisted the urge to download the Let's Fuck Now apps to my phone so far. Besides, I have a terrific life already, thank you very much. I even turned 40 a few years ago and the world didn't end. But this certain summer was already a rough one for me. Oh, wait, you may not know who I am. My name is Scotty Bradley of the Uptown Bradleys in the Garden District Diderots. Despite that impressive society pedigree, I don't belong to any Mardi Gras crews or any of the fraternal organizations. I could if I wanted to, despite being gay. That would have been a strike against me as recently as 30 years ago, unless I chose to remain closeted, as so many others before me did and still do. My parents rebelled against all that society stuff their parents put them through when they were kids and remain committed to social and environmental justice to this day. They're what used to be called hippies, I think. I was lucky to be born to them. They love that I'm gay, belong to PFLAG and march in parades. They raised me and my older siblings to always question authority and to fight for the less privileged. My older brother Storm went to law school and my sister Rain is married to a surgeon. She's a lady who lunches, and while she can be as radical as my parents, she likes the society stuff and is proud to be in the crew of Iris. So how is my name Scotty when they have such unique names? Scotty is actually my middle name. Both sides of the family apparently demanded that Mom and Dad give me a more traditional family name, so they gave me my grandmother's maiden names, Milton Scott. Yes, they named me Milton Bradley. Storm started calling me Scotty when we were kids, and now hardly anyone remembers what my actual first name is, besides the DMV, the IRS, insurance companies, and the passport office, of course. I've considered dropping the Milton legally or switching it to Scott Milton, but never got around to it, which tells me it really doesn't matter that much to me anyway. I also have two life partners, Frank and Colin. I met the two of them the year before Katrina, that last Southern decadence weekend of the before times. Frank was a special agent for the FBI. Colin was using Cat Burglar as his cover story for the weekend, and we all just kind of fell in love with each other while escaping skinhead Nazis. Those first couple of years were rough. There were a lot of layers to peel back with Colin, as it turned out. He actually worked for an international guns for hire organization called Blackledge. For several years, he let us believe he was a murderer. I mean, he let us think that he'd killed two of my half-uncles. It's a long story. But he finally was able to tell us the truth, and we've lived happily ever after ever since. Well, we would have if not for my bad habit of stumbling over dead bodies. Our most recent dead body case brought up something from my past, far back when I was a kid, and forced me to recognize that the way I'd always remembered that something was not, in fact, correct and was actually much worse than I ever believed it to be. I mean, finding out that your first love was actually a pedophile and a groomer would be a shock to most people, I think. Colin and Frank thought it might not be a bad idea for me to see a therapist, work through it with a professional. I didn't know what to expect from therapy. I've always been kind of happy-go-lucky, someone who always tries to see the positive in everything. My motto has always been life doesn't give you anything you can't handle. It's how you handle it that matters. That has always worked well for me. But even I was having trouble seeing the positive in being groomed as a teenager. And that's where I'll stop.
Wow, there's a lot in that. Where do I start? Murderers who aren't murderers, dead bodies, pedophiles, dog groomers. So much. And yes, and I agree with JJ too. Great ending line. That was definitely an introduction to that series. I put the link to the entire series in the chat if you want to check out Scotty Bradley. Thank you so much, Greg. Next up, we have Heather O'Malley. Hello, hello. Please go ahead, introduce yourself and your book.
Hello. I'm Heather O'Malley, and my book is Goodbye, Hello. The idea of the book is a trans veteran who's been having some problems with their family is going to school to become a nurse. They had served in the military as a corpsman, to basically a first aid provider for infantry troops, and has since transitioned. And as she's lamenting her life and wishes she could get back into a relationship like she had with her old girlfriend in high school, she gets a phone call and finds out her father dies. And this starts everything going. And the scene I'm reading is when Kelly is at the funeral home with her family, getting ready to have the receiving line, and is talking to people. So here we go. Kelly had no idea what to say. This wasn't something she'd ever expected to hear about her father. She walked off and sat heavily in a chair. Was her reluctance to talk about issues the same as her father's? If so, was that something that absolved her of the guilt of her not talking to her mom? She could almost hear her therapist's voice in her head. It may absolve you of the guilt, but talking to your mother about a problem you have with her is still something you should do. Carrie came over and glared down at her. Kelly groaned softly before she cut her eyes up towards her sister and asked, "Yes? What were you talking about with Grandma and Grandpa?" The fact that Dad was terrible at telling people he was sick or feeling bad. Oh, that. Yeah, I figured that out years ago, especially when he got bronchitis or something. He would be coughing and saying, "Oh, he was fine," all at the same time. It's hard to miss something like that. Kelly bristled. She had noted the same thing, but hadn't translated it into anything more than a quirk. I knew he did that, but I didn't think it was a pattern of behavior that he'd had his whole life. Grandpa talked about how Dad fell out of a tree and broke his arm and tried to hide that his arm was broken. Carrie rolled her eyes before muttering, "Boys." Kelly gave a short laugh. "Absolutely." Carrie narrowed her eyes and leaned in. "Why are you agreeing?" Because boys are weird and often don't make any sense." Kelly certainly knew that after spending time with the infantry guys. They always did ridiculous things to prove how tough or strong or agile they were. It had been confounding, and she had never understood it. "But you're a boy," Kelly scoffed. "Not hardly. I just played one on TV." Carrie gave an annoyed huff, and walked off. Kelly watched her go with some degree of pleasure. Her sister was being annoying. She saw that the receiving line was starting to form since there were already people starting to gather. She stood between Tim and her sister. One of the people from the funeral home opened the door and people began to come in. They started saying their condolences, first with their grandmother and moving down the line. Some of them were so heartfelt and sincere that her breath caught in her chest and she could feel her eyes begin to water. All she could do was smile and say thank you as the line kept moving, while memories of her father ran through her head. There was a lull in the line, and she took the opportunity to dab her eyes with her handkerchief. She wasn't sure what she was supposed to think or feel about this because the condolences faded into a background noise, not as much a balm for her soul as a constant reminder he was dead. It was only the sincere ones that seemed to make a difference and register with her. So many of these people were just being perfunctorily polite, since this was just a socially agreed upon position to show that you missed the person who had passed, whether you did or not. Then again, wasn't that how people talk to kids when something happened? Kind of talking down to them as if they didn't understand all that was going on. It seemed to be true, no matter the age of the kid. It made her feel good to see so many people here. Her father had been loved by, or at least acquainted with, a large number of people. He hadn't lived a particularly long life, yet it was obvious he had lived a rich one. Kelly hoped that when her time came, she would also have a large number of people care about her death. The person across from her was familiar in a different way. She recognized the face, but the hair or something was different. Not the color, dark blonde, but maybe the cut. It was bugging her as the attractive young woman spoke. Hi, Kelly. I'm so sorry for your loss. Your dad was always nice to me. Recognition took a few seconds before she began to smile. She knew who this was now. Teresa? Oh my God! How long has it been? Her mind raced and she tried to think of how long it had been since they'd last seen each other. I think it's been about 7 years since then. I mean, we broke up and then you joined the army of all things. And now look at you. Things certainly have changed since then. Teresa tracked her eyes all over Kelly, taking in the entirety of her. Kelly searched Teresa's face to see if she meant anything bad. Teresa seemed sincere in her feelings, and her appearance made something unclench within her. I'm so happy you're here. This is such a surprise. We have to catch up. Absolutely. Teresa gave her familiar and earnest smile that Kelly had missed. Teresa walked on, saying her condolences to Carrie, then moving off amongst the other people here for the visitation. Kelly shook her head in some belief that Teresa was here. After their breakup, she didn't think she'd ever see her high school sweetheart again. Things had been so confusing at the end for several reasons, but it was clear that things had changed a great deal with both of them. And maybe the situation was different than it had been before she decided to join the army. She smiled to herself, then went back to the receiving line. This was a positive development. Once this was done, she would have to go and talk to her. It was imperative.
Oh, that's lovely. That was very poignant. Thank you. Next up, we have JJ Hale. Hi,
Hello.
JJ. I'm so sorry that you're on this panel so late at night over there. Thank you for being here with us. Please go ahead, introduce yourself and your book.
I'm JJ Hale, and I'm reading from my next release, so Sweet Surrender. It's out next month and it's available for pre-order now. And I'm going to start reading right from the start, chapter 1. And basically it's about a woman who's hiring a nanny. But the night before the nanny comes, this is where we start. So I'll get right into it. It was times like these that Eliza Marsh longed for landline phones to make a comeback. Slamming the handset down with a resounding bang would be far more satisfying than angrily jabbing her finger against the end call button. Go screw yourself, asshole, she grumbled, too late for the recipient to hear. Hello to you too? Eliza's head shot up, and she relaxed as Lee, her colleague and closest friend, walked through her open office door. You should probably keep the door closed if you want to be left alone with your profanities. But it's much more fun to rant to someone else. What's up? Just the usual sexist shit. Rory thinks it's beneath him to explain himself to a woman, despite that woman being his boss and doing her damn job to ensure he's doing his. Why haven't you fired his ass yet? You're the boss. Cut him loose to ruin someone else's mood. Money, he brings it in most of the time anyway. I may be a boss, but I'm not the boss. Yet, Lee chimed in. Eliza smiled. Yet. For now, though, he makes my stats look good, and that's what's going to matter next year. You look like you could use a drink. The kids are with Prince Charming this week, right? Eliza rolled her eyes at the nickname Lee had given to her ex-husband back when they'd first started to date. Yes, Henry has the kids. I should probably get going and get some sleep, though. The new nanny starts tomorrow. I'd rather not give the wrong impression if I'm exhausted and hungover. Lee hopped up from the couch. You're allowed a social life. All work and no play leads to grumpiness, and nobody wants to deal with a grumpy Eliza. Come on, just one drink? Fine, one drink, and you're buying. Eliza huffed. That new swanky hotel that opened up in the Quay is supposed to do amazing cocktails. You know, the chain that's all modern and colourful, and the staff all look at you like you're bothering them by asking for something. Why would we want to go somewhere with bad service? It's not bad service. It's supposed to be like aloof or something. Like you need them more than they need you. And we're going there because they have amazing cocktails, remember? Keep up, old woman. I'm 10 years older than you brat. It's not my fault you act like you haven't matured past your teen years. Lee stuck out her tongue, proving Eliza's point. They reached the hotel, and Eliza was surprised at the noise levels that already greeted her ears before the doors even opened. How is anybody supposed to sleep at this hotel? I can barely hear myself think. Eliza had to lean in for Lee to hear her over the chatter and music. It's not even 10, nobody's sleeping yet. The night is young, and so are we. You just called me old a minute ago. I'm beginning to feel it. The lighting was dim, and the bulbs were a fluorescent pink that cast everything in a weird glow. Here, let's go find somewhere to sit. Lee handed her a tall glass of liquid that was possibly blue and green, but it was hard to tell with the pink lighting. After several minutes, it was clear that a seat was not going to be found. They located a spot against the wall. The one drink would stay one tonight. There was no seats, music too loud to talk, lights too trippy to see. None of that lent itself to a fun night out. Hey, want to dance? The voice was loud enough to be heard over the music, and Eliza glanced at the beautiful young blonde smiling at them. Not tonight, Eliza said with a firm smile. She found it best not to draw out the conversation with a sorry or an excuse. That only led to pointless back and forths. Oh, sorry, I was asking your daughter? The woman glanced between Eliza and Lee, before her eyes stayed on Lee's with confidence. Eliza's face heated at the woman's mistake as the words caught up with her. Lee sputtered a laugh beside her. Daughter? Her daughter? She's not my... Mind if I go dance, Mom? Eliza glared at Lee, whose teasing eyes already were roaming back to the woman's ass as she walked to the dance floor. Go while you're still breathing, Eliza said through gritted teeth. Daughter? It was true that Lee looked much younger than her 35 years. With both of their chestnut brown hair, warm ivory skin and blue eyes, they had often been mistaken for sisters on nights out together. But mother and daughter, seriously? Eliza nursed her ego as she walked back to the bar to order another drink. You look like someone kicked your puppy. Eliza glanced to the side and could barely make out the features of the stranger who had spoken. They needed to go buy regular bulbs for this place. It was ridiculous. Something like that, Eliza said. She waved down the bartender and ordered another cocktail. The real question is, Why would you bring a puppy to a crowded place like this and risk it being kicked? Eliza shook her head, but couldn't stop the smile at the ridiculous image that the words conjured. Didn't you know puppies love to be blinded by hot pink lighting? The stranger laughed, and the sound wrapped its way around Eliza. What is with the lighting? I was beginning to think I was in a fever dream when I went into the toilets, and it was hot pink in there too. I couldn't even see myself pee. Do you need to see yourself pee? Eliza asked. She turned to face the woman as her words were met with a bark of laughter. Don't you? Even with the awful lighting, Eliza could tell that the woman was stunning. She radiated an air of confidence, not shying away as her mouth turned into a slight grin while Eliza appraised her. So, are you down for a nightcap, or to drown your puppy-filled sorrows? Nightcap? Oh, no, I'm not staying at the hotel. A friend dragged me along, but ditched me to dance with someone who looks like the owner of this Barbie dream house. Said owner referred to me as her mother, hence the ego-bruised mood, Eliza replied. She was a little ashamed to admit that the blonde woman's words stung, but she'd always been one for honesty. Wait, the Barbie doll called you her mother? Are you sure she wasn't trying to flatter you like Pop Icon-style mother? Eliza took a sip of her drink as she tried to understand the question. Pop Icon-style, I have no idea what you're talking about. But no, alas, I don't think she was trying to flatter me or gave me much thought at all. My friend and I look quite similar, so she assumed that Lee was my daughter. Because apparently in a place like this, I look ancient. Pink is not my colour. Well, if it helps at all, I certainly don't think you look like anyone's mother tonight. What do I look like then? It was a shameless compliment fishing, but Eliza wasn't above asking for what she needed. Right now, she needed to feel like her life was more than her job and her kids. She was still a woman in her prime who deserved the attention that her ego craved. You look like you could use more than a drink to get your mind off whatever is running around that beautiful head of yours. Eliza's eyes widened briefly before she assumed her usual mask of indifference. I don't mess with drugs, if that's what you mean. I might not be old enough to be your mother, but my wild days are behind me. The woman chuckled and ran her fingers lightly over Eliza's knee. I didn't mean drugs, although I am interested in hearing about those wild days. You said you're not staying here tonight, but I am, and quite frankly, I'd like to be the one to clear your mind, along with my own. Do you want to come back to my room? Eliza had to work to stop her jaw from dropping at the statement. It was so matter-of-fact that Eliza had to appreciate the woman for getting straight to the point. I don't even know your name. You don't know mine, and you're asking me to go to your room. I could be anybody. The woman shrugged as she finished her drink and set the glass on the table. It's kind of the point, though. You could be anybody, and who you are, or who I am, doesn't have to matter. What does matter is that you haven't stopped your eyes from wandering over every inch of me since you turned to face me. There's been an instant spark between us since the moment you stood next to me, and I'm not one for ignoring sparks. I'm only here for one night. I'd rather not waste more time of it tiptoeing around what I want when I could be spending it getting it. Eliza's body thrummed with electricity at the cool, calm delivery of that hot-as-hell pitch. She had had one-night stands before, more than once. It wasn't new territory for her, but something about this was different. Before she could analyse it any further, she slid her hand into the woman's waiting palm and moved away from the bar. This might not be how she had planned tonight going, but suddenly there was nothing more appealing than losing herself in this stranger's body and ignoring reality for one night. I still don't know your name, Eliza said, as they stepped into the elevator. Are you worried you won't know what to scream out? That's me.
All right, JJ bringing the fun to this panel. We've had murders and arguments and funerals, and thank you so much for lifting up the mood. That was awesome. Okay, last but not least, we have Joe Hemmingwood.
Okay, so this is Heart's Appraisal. This is my latest novel. We have Andy, who is an ex-attorney. She's moved out to rural Alabama to move into her aunt's home that she inherited. She's hoping to make some good money selling properties, and she's severely underestimated the local population. But our other protagonist, Hazel, is there to hopefully set her right. Andy visibly rolled the lemonade around in her mouth and then set the glass aside. I've got my first client. She looked across the space between them to smile at Hazel. Ernest Hardy. Hardy. Do you know him? I'm acquainted. Hazel's mind flipped through her personal Rolodex of community and familial information. I think he's around my dad's age. Grew up in Green Valley. His father just passed away at Christmas. You do know everyone. Hazel shrugged. When you're as involved in the community as I am, it's hard not to. Indeed. Andy raised one brow. Well, he doesn't want to keep the property, so we're going to break it into tracts and break it into tracts. Hazel couldn't help the interruption. The property she was envisioning was a prime rural estate. Andy cocked her head. Yes, tracts, and auction them off separately. Auction them? Is there a reason that's a bad idea? Hazel considered her words. People around here might not be into an auction. Well, they will be if they want the real estate. Hazel bit her tongue hard and managed a non-committal hum. But Andy persisted. What? What is it you're trying not to say? The monotonous creaking of the rocking chairs on the aged boards of the porch seemed suddenly loud in the space between them. Hazel watched a butterfly light gently on her lavender and tiptoed to the top, where it opened and shut its wings with a slow, regular rhythm, like a steady breath beating in a smudgy collage of orange, fawn, and cream. People in Green Valley are accustomed to land passing from hand to hand, either through family or purchase. Auctions are for cattle, not for real estate as far as they're concerned. They prefer things much more straightforward than that. Hazel also longed to say that it felt as though Andy was trying to take advantage of the people in her community, but she didn't have any evidence to support this theory. It is all straightforward. I don't see how it's different from cattle. No, you wouldn't, Hazel sighed. How could she explain to this woman that land, unlike cattle, was considered enduring? It was one of the few types of real measurable wealth accessible to the citizens of Green Valley. It was something invaluable that they were able to pass into posterity, unlike cattle, which was often destined to trade hands several times before their final destination. For the first time, Andy turned her head and faced Hazel fully. She pinned Hazel with cold eyes. What do you mean by that? Hazel imagined the intense gaze had been utilized in innumerable courtrooms. I mean that you don't know these people, my community, my people. People are people. Andy spoke with such certainty Hazel was almost convinced. To a certain extent, yes, but I think you'll find that the priorities of folks here are different from those of the folks in Birmingham. Andy returned her gaze to the yard before her. Hazel watched the butterfly suddenly take flight, startled by something only it could sense. A slow, soft roll of thunder crested in the distance, a drum wrapped in velvet. A gust of wind stirred lazily, bringing the thick smell of rain with it. Storms the next couple of weeks. Hazel smiled crookedly. And now we're talking about the weather. She was uncomfortable with Andy's tactics, but she wasn't going to avoid the real topic at hand. She cleared her throat. When is the auction? 2 weeks. At the Hardy farm. Andy scanned her face again. Yes, at 10 o'clock on the Monday. I'll be there. Given this conversation, I didn't take you to be the sort for an auction. You don't know me very well. Andy laughed. It was a soft chuffing, like the sound an amused tiger would make. Even her laugh is sexy. Really, it wasn't fair. I suppose I don't. I should rectify that. We are neighbors, after all. We are indeed. I wonder how my expensive liquor would taste in your lemonade. It was so casual, and yet delivered with such a suggestive tone that Hazel swallowed hard. Are you asking me over? If you'd be open to that. Hazel realized the pace of her rocking had accelerated and forced herself to ease off. Sure, I'd like to see the work you've done on Darcy's home. My home, you mean? Hazel arched a brow. Does it really feel like yours already? Andy smiled, but her eyes remained cool. Feeling has nothing to do with it. She rose smoothly but abruptly from the chair. Thank you for the lemonade, Hazel. I have a great deal of work to do between now and the auction. Without waiting for a reply, Andy was down the steps and gliding across the yard toward Darcy's home. You're wrong, Hazel murmured. Feeling has everything to do with it. Angie retrieved her leather briefcase and retreated to her study. When she'd driven by Hazel's house and seen her outside, she'd been compelled to walk over. Andy had not stopped to analyze the impulse. She'd simply left her case on the kitchen counter and walked out the front door. The conversation had been stirring. She loved the spark of confrontation in Hazel's voice. Andy lived for confrontation. It was part of her nature. The feud of wit and will was an arena in which she thrived, and Andy was pleased, despite her abrupt departure, that Hazel seemed to be well equipped for sparring. Though Hazel had hit a sore spot with her last comment about Darcy's home. No, she ate and slept and brushed her teeth here, but it didn't feel like home. She'd become accustomed to the sounds of the wind whistling around the corners and the lazy grazing of the walnut limb on the south wall. Andy knew well the feel of the cold bathroom tile when she forgot her slippers, or the way the kitchen sink dripped if you didn't turn the handle just the perfect angle. Despite her familiarity with the house, though, she still felt out of place. She didn't know how to fix that. Mostly, she tried not to think about it. Andy placed her briefcase on the study coffee table before pouring a glass of bourbon from the square-sided bottle. She sat in the soft leather chair and then carefully unpacked the case to arrange information about the Hardy estate into stacks. Andy contemplated the assortment of data and maps before her, but couldn't get her brain to dial in. Hazel's earnest, golden eyes kept flashing to mine. Damn. She stood, lowball glass in hand, and paced to the corner of windows to glare into the gloaming. The sun setting at the front of the house hit the tree line at the back with a vibrating orange glow. It gave the flaky bark of the pines a soft, fuzzy appearance, and Andy had the unprecedented impulse to caress the trunks with her fingertips. She's getting to me. She took a sip of liquor and savored the smoky burn of it. Andy could still hear the creak of the rocking chairs and taste the lemonade on her tongue. Hazel was the most real person she'd ever met. She was genuine and earnest in a way that spoke of a woman who truly knew herself. And she has a way of cutting me deep. It was this that had prompted Annie to leave so abruptly. She, who'd never run from anything, who thrived on confrontation, had run from Hazel's probing. Feeling has nothing to do with it. She couldn't believe she'd said that. Andy sighed and turned from the window. Such a callous thing to say, and not what she actually believed. Andy was an expert at mastering her emotions. In the courtroom, this had been essential. Focusing on the facts of a case and presenting them in a way that benefited her client was her specialty. More than once, she'd uttered that exact line in the courtroom. Feeling has nothing to do with it. But she was no longer in a courtroom, and using facts and logic to keep people at a distance just wasn't as important as it once had been. She had been shocked at the emotions Hazel's query brought to the surface, and maybe a little ashamed. Hazel was really getting to her. How could she even begin to explain herself to someone like Hazel? Someone who ate, slept, and breathed her community. Someone who drew people to her rather than pushing them away. Someone woven into the fabric of her surroundings the way a tree would grow around an object in its path. As much as Andy enjoyed Hazel's company, she feared they were too manifestly different to what? What was it she wanted to avoid or instigate? A friendship? She was pretty sure a friendship was safe territory, even with so many differences. But it wasn't friendship that Andy could picture with Hazel. It was something deeper than anything she'd wanted before.
Oh, well, that's lovely. Thank you. I love that, like, first meeting, getting to know someone, all the feels, the curiosity, and the angst that goes with it. So my question is, what makes a good character voice? What is it exactly for you that makes a character voice good, that makes it them?
I think it just has to be relatable. I mean, I think that the best comment that I get from readers that I get a lot is that they feel like they could run into my characters at the grocery store. So I feel like they need to sound realistic. They need to sound like actual people. That maybe seems really general, but that's when I'm writing. That's like, I will say their lines out loud. And sometimes I'll read a book and I'll be like, who talks like that? So I think dialogue is really important in that it helps your readers relate to your characters.
That's an interesting comment because we had a dialogue panel earlier and everyone was like, oh, don't write like how people really say things.
I disagree with that.
Interesting. Okay. JJ, how about you? What makes a character voice memorable?
I think the main thing to me is it has to make sense to the character you've built. You know, as you go page by page, line by line, you are designing this person. You're designing their personality and stuff. And nothing throws me off more than like them saying or doing something that you've built completely against. You know, it doesn't make any sense. And it could be something very minor. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It doesn't have to be something out of the water, but it's just something where you're like, they wouldn't say that, you know, because your readers get to know the person you're building. And I think you just need to stay authentic to whoever they are. And, you know, whatever you want them to be, whether they're a good character, a bad character, a villain, a, you know, hero, it doesn't matter once they're authentic to what you've built.
Yeah, that's a good point. Greg, how about you? What makes a character voice memorable?
Well, I think it has to be unique to the character. I mean, it has to, like Georgia said, they have to be relatable. They have to be somebody that, it has to be a character that the reader can identify with and empathize with, but you can also do that with villains too. It really has to do, when I do it, I usually write in the first person because it's easier for me. And I just try to think of who the character is, and I kind of turn myself into that person as I write it. So I know the character so well that I know how they'll react and how they'll do. And it's, how they'll react, what they'll say, how they'll respond to other people, how they'll respond to situations. Scotty's really fun because he's, very easygoing. He just takes everything as it comes. And I think people relate to the fact that he doesn't freak out about any of the freaky things that happen to him all the time. I think people relate to that somehow.
Well, there's been so many of them now. He's like, oh, this again, right?
Kind of like the world right now, yeah. Oh, this again.
So what's it like writing in first person? Do you ever find that you like your voice and his voice conflates, or they're totally separate?
I think they're separate, but they're similar. I mean, it's coming from me, so there's always going to be a part of me that's coming into it somehow because my own biases and things, how I see the world. It's just harder for me to do it the third person because I end up shifting points of view and scenes and forget that I can't see. It's easier in first person because you don't really have to know what the other people are thinking.
Yeah.
Where in third person you kind of do. I've always thought it was just me being lazy. But
I don't know. How many books you got now, Greg? Like 40? I don't think we can call you lazy.
40. I lost track. I'd have to sit down and count, but it's up there. Yeah. Between 40 and 50 now.
Yeah.
And that's not counting the stuff I edit. So.
Heather, how about you? What makes a character voice memorable?
When I'm working initially trying to figure out who the character is, do I want to spend time with them? I mean, books are massive time sinks. It's basically you take your life and you pour it onto pages. Do I want to hang out with this person? And if I'm writing something from a villain's point of view, are they interesting enough to want to spend that time? And if I'm like, yeah, this person seems fun, I can hang out with them, that could be cool. And then that leads me on these stories, and I'm like, oh, okay. But if I'm start writing a character and they're just like boring as all you can imagine, I'm just like, no, this character is worthless. I have to find another approach. So you're gone. Let's see how this version goes.
Yeah, I think the word now is relatable. Everyone's kind of answering around that. Joe, how about you? Anything to add?
I think the only thing that I would add is that I mean, and it goes along with the relatable thing, is that they're like authentically a whole person. So if you were to sit down with your character and ask them what their favorite color is, or what's their comfort food, or like, you would be able to imagine, oh yeah, they have that. I know that about them. Like that you could look at them from the big picture as well. And you know all their tiny quirks. And I think that helps me. I do like a whole character profile, and that helps me write a more authentic or human sort of person because I know them backwards and forwards. And I think that makes them relatable and human and real.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you, everyone. This was an amazing panel. Great readings. All the links to the books are in the chat. There is a sale running all weekend, so please grab them while they're on sale. And please join us for our next panel, which is called Red Flags, Questionable Character Behavior. So we'll see you there in just a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.